Hello. Okay. People are entering the class. So about half people are in so far. Okay, while people are entering, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to, oh, can everybody hear me? I want to make a double check. Is everybody hear me? Everything seem okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me start screen sharing. Make sure you can, okay. Is the desktop visible now? Okay, here's the class meeting for today. Okay, great. Okay, so I think looks like almost everyone's in the class by now. Okay. All right. So first, let me just remind you that the assignment's due on Thursday. There's a programming assignment due on Thursday. Okay. Um, does anybody have any quick question about the program assignment? I mean, I've got people have been asking me questions by email, which is great. But has anybody got a question they'd like to ask right now? Has anybody got a question they'd like to ask about the homework assignment in general?
What again is the assignment due Thursday?
Oh, midnight.
No,
Midnight
like
of
what?
Thursday.
Where
Pardon me?
again is where again is the assignment? Like instructions and all that?
Oh, okay. So if you this page here has a page on turning in your homework assignment. And uh, if you also go to the homework assignment, see down here it says turn in a zip file. Well, that turn in is a link to the instructions.
Wait, this here is due Thursday? What you were just looking at?
Pardon me?
What you were just looking at there is due Thursday.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought when you said due today, I thought that was due today. Never mind then.
I thought I said Thursday. Did I say today? Really? The homework assignment is
Oh no,
due.
I probably just misheard you. I'm
Yeah, I
sorry.
may have said. I think I said Thursday. I may have said today, but yeah, it's due. It's due in 2 days. Okay, so it's the usual. It's the same assignment we've been talking about. Yeah, it's not. It's not. Yeah, I'm not. There's not a new assignment up there. So it's the one we've been talking about. Okay. All right. So yeah, you turn it in on Blackboard on Brightspace. Okay. So you'll be uploading it to the course management system, just like the first homework assignment. Anybody got any questions about this programming assignment? Like usual, if you have questions, you can send me an email. I can answer questions by email. If you want to talk about it, ask me to either come to the office hour on Monday and Wednesday, or just send me a request to meet over Zoom. Okay. All right. So, all right. So the reading assignment for today was this chapter 4 in this book. Let me close this. On methods. We're going to start talking about methods. Okay, and that's a kind of important topic. It's actually one of the most important topics in the whole semester. And besides this chapter 4, we'll also be talking about methods from the other book. So your reading assignment for Thursday is to read these sections on, well, it's a little bit more than methods, it's objects and methods. So in this other book, the reading assignment is to read 2 sections on objects and then 2 sections on methods. These 2 sections here are much more like this one here, but this book introduces an idea that we're going to need something called objects. Okay, so these are 4 not very long sections, and like this other sections in this book, it's got lots of problems in it. So make sure you do the problems in here, because the problems I think are a good way to, some of them you run programs, some of them you answer questions. They're a good way to keep up with what's being talked about. So the reading assignment is for Thursday is 4 short sections from this other book that overlap a lot with what we're going to talk about today, more about methods. Like what we're talking about today is only methods. Then on Thursday, we'll be talking about objects and methods. So we'll be introducing a new idea on Thursday. Okay? Okay, so let me close this tab. We want to talk about, whoops, I closed the wrong one. We want to go to this book and start talking about methods. Okay. A method is something similar to what your homework assignment is. I mean, if we go back to your homework assignment, the idea was that there's something here that's appearing over and over again. Like that appears over and over again. So you give it a name. And then once you gave it a name like this, see this thing here appears here. It appears here, 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 here. So once you give it a name, you by now, I hope you've all started on the assignment. You see that once you give something a name and then you use the name, your program becomes shorter. And we'll see that eventually it actually makes your program more organized. So right now, the emphasis is on making your program shorter. But giving names to things actually does way more than make a program shorter. Giving names to things can make a program more organized. Methods are a very fancy way to give a name to something. Instead of giving name to a variable, they give a name to lines of code. See, so methods are a way of naming a block of code so that you can refer to that whole block of code instead of just referring to a single value. Like this name refers to a bunch of pluses, okay? But that's a variable and a value. It can't refer to a whole bunch of lines of code. So let's go back over here to method. Now the goal is to give a name to a bunch of code. And here's their first, let's see. Here's an example down here. Here's a name called 3line. That's the name of something called a method. This is what declares the method. What you're doing when you declare a method is you give a name to a block of code. Okay. A method is a special kind of variable. The name of the method becomes a name for a block of code. Now the syntax is kind of tricky. There's a public here, a static here, and a void here. Well, we'll worry about those later. They just come along. This is the name of the method. This is the thing that we're going to reuse. We're going to reuse this name. After the name comes a pair of parentheses. We'll see later what they're for. After the parentheses comes an opening brace. Here's what we're naming. We're naming that block of code. And then there's a closing brace to say this is the end of what we're naming. So this starts what we're naming, this ends what we're naming, this is the name, and this kind of comes along for the ride for now. Okay. Now, if I use that name, I'm referring to now this block of code, as opposed to over here, when I use that name, I'm referring to this string. Now, when I use a name, I'm referring to that block of code. Okay. So now here's a program. The program prints something, then the program uses that name. And it uses that name with a pair of parentheses after it. We call this a method call. So this is a method call. We're calling the method. Up here, this is called a method definition. Up here, I'm telling you what the word means. Like in a dictionary, I have the definition of the word. The word means new line, new line, new line. Okay. Down here, I use the word. That's called a method call. Now, what Java does when you call a method is it goes up there and does the code that's in the method. Now, each line of this method is actually another method. See, notice that what's the word new line mean? See, there's this name here, new line. New line is this method here. This method only has one line of code in it, which is actually kind of dumb. There's no reason to give a name to something that's just so short. But this is just an example. Like over here, you wouldn't give a name to a string that only held one character. or 2 characters. It wouldn't be worth your while to give a name to a string that only held 1 or 2 characters. It usually is not worth your while to give a name to a method that's only got 1 line in it, but sometimes it is. But usually the method will have 3 or 4 or more lines in it. But here we're just trying to introduce the idea. So we have this name. It's the name for a method. So this is another method definition. Okay. Here is where we're calling the method. And we're calling that method several times here. Okay. So the method's being called several times down here. There. Okay. And in here, this is actually another method call. We're calling the println method. See how that's got println with a pair of parentheses after it. So that's another method call. But we didn't write this method. We wrote this method here, and we're calling it here. We wrote this method here, and we're calling it here. Println, we call it here, and we call it here, we call it here. So if I want, I can, that's a method call. I'm calling println. And even over here, that's another method call to println. Now, println was written for us. When you program, you do a combination of using methods that other people wrote and using methods that you wrote. And we're going to see that that's a big part of what we're learning is we learn to use methods that other people wrote, and we learn to write our own methods. In this silly little example, we've written 2 very simple methods that don't do much interesting, and we're calling one method that was written for us by the Java language. Okay, so a method call is a name followed by a parentheses. Now, in a little while, we'll talk about this. This is called a parameter. This is telling the method, I want you to do something for me, and I want you to do it with this parameter. Here, we want this method to do something for us, but there's no parameter yet. Okay, so we're saying to this method, please do something for me. What it's doing is the code that's inside its method. Okay, you use the name of the method followed by parentheses to say, call the method. Okay, the method does what it's supposed to do. Sometimes the method does it using some information, the parameter, and sometimes the method doesn't need any parameter. Oh, see this word void, the void here? No, I'm sorry. The fact that there's no parameters because of this is empty in here. See, the emptiness in here means that this guy doesn't have any input to him. The empty parentheses here mean that this one doesn't have any input. In a little while, we'll see methods that need a parameter that takes some input, then do their work using that input. Okay, so when my program runs, it always starts at main. My program, when I run it, it'll start here at main. I'll call the println method, which will print this for me. Then my program will call my method. It'll go up to here where there's the name, and it'll say, oh, I'm supposed to do what's inside here. So it'll go to this line. But this line calls this method. So Java jumps now from here to here, and it says, oh, we're supposed to do what's inside here. Well, what's inside here is that line there. So it executes that method call, and that one actually prints, it'll print over here a blank line. When this is done, it'll go back to here where it was called from. Then this thing will go to the next line and make another call up to here, which will do another blank line, come back down to here, which would mean this will be done, and go to this guy, which will then do another call up to here. Then when this is finished printing, it'll go back to here. Now that you're done with 3 line, so you go back to where 3 line was called, which would be back to here, then my program will do a call to println again. what I just described to you is what's called the flow of execution. I'm executing this program. The program starts by executing main, and it executes line 14, which does a print line, then executes line 15, which jumps you up to line 8. Line 8 executes new line, which jumps you to line 4. When line 4 is done, you go back to line 9 because you're done with line 8. But line 9 jumps you back up here to new line. This idea is called flow. You're watching what would be, if this was like a little worker who was following this recipe, these directions, the worker eyes would, or the worker's mind would flow from this line to that line, which would send them up to this line, which would send them up to this line. Then they'd be back to that line, which is done, then to this line, back up. Okay, so this is gonna be something we spend a lot of time thinking about. This flow of execution is going to be real important. Now let me show you. Now if I run this program, see, there's this output came from that line there. These blank lines came from this here, executed over and over again by this one calling this one, which called this one, then this one called that one again, then this one called that one again. So that gave us these 3 lines. But notice we don't see the flow of execution, but we can if we turn to the Java visualizer. So let me show you something. Let's switch from here. I'm going to highlight this code, copy it, and I'm going to open up a tab to the Java visualizer. The Java visualizer lets me, what it's visualizing literally is this flow of execution. That's what the Java visualizer's job is, to visualize the flow of execution. So let me delete the code that's in there, paste the code that I copied from the book, and let me visualize it. Okay. The yellow thing means that's where I am. I'm about to do the yellow line. Okay, we've used the visualizer before, and now we're just going to think a little bit more about what it means. Remember, the output will appear down here. My code is here, and I'll see my variables over here. Now, this program actually has no variables. If you look, there's no variables over here, but we're going to see something else over here that's useful to us. So we won't see any variables in this program, but we will see something over here that's still useful. Okay, so I'm starting at line 14. When I click forward, I'm about to, well, I click forward, I'm going to do line 14. See, when I did line 14, notice it's yellow when you're about to do it, it's gray when you've just done it. So I've just done line 14. Now I'm about to do line 15, and line 14 did its work. It's printed this in the output. So line 14 did its work. Now line 15 is about to do its work. But line 15 is directing us to go up here to 3 line. So I click forward. Now notice, I'm about to do line 8 because I came from line 15. I was down here and it told me to go up here. Now look over here. That same information is over here. I was at line 15 in main. Now normally if there were any variables in main, they'd be stored in here. Right now there's no variables, but this thing is telling me that I was at line 15 in main, but line 15 in main told me to go up to line 8 of 3 line. So that's what this picture is showing. It's showing me this method that I started in and this method I'm now in. I'm now in line 8 of 3 line, and I got there by being called from line 15 of main. Okay. Now, what am I about to do in line 8? Line 8 says you call new line, which is up here. So line 8 is about to do a jump up here to line 4. So I click forward. See, I did line 8 and it jumped me up to line 4. And now over here I see that I'm now in the method new line. I was called there by the method 3line, and 3line was called by the method main. Line 15 of main is where I came from. It jumped me to line 8 in new line, and line 8 new line sent me to line 4 in, line 8 and 3 lines sent me to line 4 in new line, okay? So this is called a stack trace. In the book, this is what the book calls section stack diagram. The Java visualizer is showing you what this book calls the flow of execution. And at the same time it shows you the flow of execution, it shows you what this book refers to as the stack diagram. We'll see later like why it's called a stack diagram. So over here, this is the stack diagram. And the flow of execution is this, watching these lines, watch this yellow line jump around my program. Going forwards and backwards down here, I can watch this yellow line jump through my program. That's referred to as the flow of execution. Over here, I see a record of how I got to line 4. I got to line 4 in new line by being called from line 8 of 3 lines, but that got called by line 15 of main. Okay, now I'm about to do this line. When I click forward, it just happened and it printed. Now notice that it printed a blank line, but I don't see that. So I'm going to fix this program. Let me go back and fix this program to make it a little bit better to see what's going on. I'm going to have this thing print a period. That makes it easier to see what it's doing. Okay, now step through it again. I start at line 14. Line 14 prints the first line of output. Then I get to line 15. I'm about to do I'm at line 15. I'm at line 15. I'm about to do line 15. I'm done with line 14. I'm about to do line 15. Line 15 is going to send me up to 3 line. So I click forward. Line 15 sent me to line 8, which is inside 3 line. So line 15 sent me to 3 line in line 8. Now, line 8 calls new line, 3 line calls new line. So line 8 sends me up to line 4. Okay, now I'm at line 4. I came from line 8, I'm at line 4. Now line 4 is going to do its work. See, now you see the output. Instead of just having notice that when it was a blank line, you didn't really see anything happen down here. So it's kind of dumb of them to print a blank line because that doesn't help you see what's happening. So just by putting a period in there, I see that it printed that line. Okay, so I see that that thing happened. This is the visualizer's way of saying that you're about to, we say, leave this method. The method's done. It's completed its work. So I leave the method. When I leave the method, I go back to where I came from. Here's a reminder of where I came from. New line at line, when I entered, well, I'm at line 5 of new line now, but I came to new line from 3 line, line 8. So when I go forward, I'm going back to where I came from. Okay. Now, when I went forward, I went back to where I came from. I actually went to line 9. I had come from line 8, but line 8 was finished. So Java actually returned to line 9. Let me step back one more. Okay. I'm about to leave new line. Okay. I'm at line 5, which is the ending brace of new line. Where do I go? I go back to line 8 of 3 line, but line 8's done. So I actually end up going to line 9. So even though it's, I came from line 8, but actually I return to the next thing to do, which is line 9. So when I click forward, see, I go back to line 9. So now I'm at line 9 in 3 lines. And how did I get there? Well, remember, it was line 15 of main that sent us up here to 3 lines. So it was line 15 of main that sent us into 3 line. We're now part of the way through 3 line. We've done 8. Now we're about to do 9. Okay. So what does 9 do? Line 9 sends us back up here. Okay. Notice that we're back up here, but it's different. We're at line 4 of new line, but we came from line 9 of 3 line. Before we were at line 4 of new line, we came from line 8 of 3 line. Notice that there's a lot to keep track of here. We're starting to see what programming is really about, of keeping track of all these little details. This watching the flow of execution of a program is a big part of programming. Keeping track, eventually all programmers keep track of this in their head. Programmers learn to keep track of this flow of execution in their head. They look at the code and they just see in their head that, well, you always start at main, you print something. Oh, you're going to jump up to here. You're going to do this, but this one jumps up to here. You do this, you go back here, then you go to this one. This one goes up here. You do this, you go back to this one, you're done. You go to this one, you go back up to here, do this, you go back to this one. This one's done, so you're at this last line. So you go back to where you came. This is done, so now you do this. That was real quickly me doing in my head the flow of execution of this program. When you're starting programming, the flow of execution is tough. It takes practice getting used to it. That's what the Java Visualizer is to help with, to help you see so you can step your way through the flow of execution. Okay, right now, main 15 sent us up into 3 line. 3 lines, line 9, well, that's this middle line of 3 line. It sent us back up into new line. So we're at line 4 of new line. We're about to do it. Line 4 of new line printed this second dot. Okay, now new line is done. So we're about to leave new line. You'd think we would go back to line 9 of 3 line, but 3 line is done here at line 9. So we actually go back to line 10. So I'm about to return actually to line 10. Okay, so now I'm at line 10 in new line, and 3 line. Okay, line 10 of 3 line, I call the method new line. So I just end up jumping back up there again. Now, things are a little bit different this time. I'm at line 4 of new line for the 3rd time, but this time I came from line 10 of 3 line. I'm up here again, but it's not like before. When I came up here this time, it's because I came from line 10. So it's the picture's subtly different now. The left-hand side looks the same. I'm at line 4. Well, it's not quite the same because I'm at the yellow line's at line 4, but the gray line's at line 10 because that's how I got to line 4. I got to line 4 from line 10, which is pointed out here. Last time we were at line 4, we came from line 9. And the time before that, when we were at line 4, we came from line 8. Okay, it's a tricky flow of ideas. You know, notice that this code is just sitting here, but it's executing very dynamically. And this is one of the things that it's really important. You see the code just sitting on the page. And as a programmer, you start realizing this code's really a movie. It's all about stepping through it and moving through it. So in a sense, you could think of this as like a movie. That see how if I click through this thing real fast, it's like I'm watching an animation of the program executing. Okay, so programmers think of code as being like a movie. There's the beginning. See, I'm already back at step 2. Okay, there's step 1. And then I watch the movie by just clicking, by fast forwarding. Okay, see, it's a movie. Now, and that yellow line was jumping all around. Yeah, and programmers learn to think about that yellow line. They don't look at a code like this and think something's sitting there. They look at code like this and they think that little yellow line bouncing around. And we really do. Yeah, all programmers learn to think this way, learn to think of code as a movie. You watch it in your head happen. But at the beginning, you don't watch it in your head, you watch it in the Java Visualizer. Good. So the Java Visualizer is the way you can actually literally see it happen. Right now, there's no variables in our program. Later on, when we're moving through this code and the movie's happening, variables will be changing too. So we will eventually have the code will be jumping around and there'll be variables changing at the same time. So the things will get even more confusing. They'll get more complicated. But that's what programming is about, getting used to these, building up these ideas. Okay, all right. So this is a real simple example of, in our case, we have 3 methods. The main method, which every program has to start with, and then 2 methods that we wrote. Well, we wrote the main method, but we don't have, you can't change the name of the main method. I can change the names of these anything I want. If I wanted, I could have called this 3 lines. I mean, I think it should have been. Like this is new line, it produces 1 line. I would have called this 3. If it would have been me, I would have called this 3 lines. Now, if I do this, I have an error in my program. What's the mistake? What did I do wrong? I changed it to 3 lines because I think that's a better name for it. It prints 3 lines. So I think I should be grammatically correct and use plural. But what did I goof up? Can anybody see what Java's unhappy with?
Is it because you didn't use it in the next line that has it?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like you have to change everywhere to make it say 3 lines?
Right. So where this is the method definition. Oh, method definition. But what else do I have to change?
Method line 15.
Yeah, the method call, where you use the name, you have to change it. Now, see, we're going to use words for everything. This is called the method definition. This is the method call. I changed the name in the definition. I better change the name where I use it. Okay, so now I make the method call agree with the method definition. So now Java's happy. Okay, right? You can name these methods. Now, suppose I change this name. Suppose I change this to, okay? Java doesn't like that. The main method, you have no right, you're not allowed to change the way the main method is named. It's got to be named exactly M-A-I-N with a lowercase m, okay? So you can choose your method names however you want, but main is special. You do not change the name of main. Okay, like for example, if I delete this part of main, I didn't change the name, but I changed what's inside here. Doesn't like it because it's not really the same main now. We'll see later that this main is not the same as what it should be because I deleted what was inside these parentheses. So Java is real picky about main. Main has to be named exactly that way. But any other method, you get to choose the name. Okay, so I could call this one Bob. I can call this one Alice. Let's see, I changed the name to Alice, so I better say Alice down here where it's called. Okay, and this one, these have to be all Bob now. Okay, now these can be some, I can use silly names if I want, though most programmers don't use silly names. But as long as the names agree, Java doesn't really care what you name things. Okay, so you get to choose the names. Usually you give them names like the original author's names were good because they kind of gave you a sense of what they do. This method just printed a blank line. Okay, this method printed 3 blank lines. Okay, so the name should more or less kind of give you a clue to what the method does. So we usually try to keep the name to be a good hint at what the method does. Okay, just like variables, you don't want to have variables called X, Y, and Z because they don't give you a hint of what they do. You want variables, things like first name, last name, age, temperature, time. You know, the variable names should give you a hint, average age, average temperature. So variable names should be like these compound words that give you a hint of what they mean. Okay, so variable names and method names should be descriptive, but you get to pick them, except for main. Main is the only one that you don't, main has to be named this exact way. Okay, now let me make this program even a little bit more complicated. Let me put in another method in here. How would I get 6 lines of output?
You put 3 lines twice.
Yeah, if I each 3 lines, by using 3 lines twice, I can get 6 lines of output. So I can, the idea is that once a method does a thing, you can call that method and have that thing done for you as many times as you want. Okay, so now if I want 6 lines, that's 2 calls to 3 lines. Okay, now let me visualize this. Oh, then down here, let me change this guy to, let me call 6 lines. Now what we'll see is a deeper stack over here, because 6 lines will call 3 lines, 3 lines will call new lines, and we'll see a more complicated collection over here. So watch what happens. So print out the first line, call 6 lines. First thing 6 lines does is says, I should call 3 lines. First thing 3 lines says is I should call new line. Okay, now let me see if I can make this picture a little bit bigger. Nah, you can't see the whole program. Okay, this is where the old style of coding is a little bit better. I can save a little bit of vertical space by putting that up there. I can even get rid of these blank lines so that you'll be able to see, almost always want a blank line between 2 methods. In fact, I always put 2 blank lines between 2 methods, but that's when you have things stored in a file. 2 blank lines makes it easy to see where one method ends and another method begins. But to make it easier to visualize, I'm going to take out the blank line between the methods so that we can kind of scrunch the code down and see it better when we do the visualize. Oh, and let me do one more. There's a blank line here. It doesn't need to be there. So let me get rid of all the blank lines just so that I can visualize things better. Okay. I almost got the whole program in this box. I can't make you can make this box grow horizontally, but for some reason, their interface doesn't let you grow this box vertically. So, okay, so now I've got all the code scrunched in there. Okay, so there's the first line of output. 6 lines calls, so my main method calls 6 lines. 6 lines calls 3 lines. 3 lines calls new line. Okay, now look over here. There's a history of what happened. I'm at line 3 of new line. How did I get there? Well, this is saying that you got there from line 6 of 3 lines. How did you get there? You got there from line 11 of, let's see what, I'm at line 3 of new lines. I got there from line 6 of 3 lines. How did I get there? I got there from line 11 of 6 lines. And I got there from line 16 of main. 16 of main started me off. It jumped into 3 lines, line 11 of 3 lines, of 6 lines, called 3 lines, which sent me to line 6 of 3 lines, which sent me to line 3. Okay, so this is what the book calls the stack diagram. Okay, the visualizer is real nice. It shows you these ideas that even this book with its built-in, like this book doesn't use the Java visualizer. So when they let you run code in this book, they don't visualize the code. The other book actually uses the Java visualizer. which is kind of a neat feature of the other book. It actually embeds the Java Visualizer in the book. Here they're using something similar to the Java Visualizer, but it doesn't let you, as far as I know, unless there's something buried in here that I haven't figured out yet, it doesn't let you watch the flow of execution. Okay, it doesn't let you, their programming environment here doesn't let you watch the flow of execution. That's what the visualizer does. Okay, all right, now I'm at line 3. It only does one thing. It printed out that dot. I'm done with new line. See, I'm at line 4. I'm at a closing brace. So I'm about to leave this guy. Notice that I'm about, we call it return. I'm about to return. See, think of it as I take a trip. I was here and I said, oh, you should take a trip up here to new line. When you're done with your trip at new line, you return to where you were sent from. So we say that that's a return. So I'm about to return to 3 lines. Well, I'm returning to line 6, but line 6 is really done. So I'm actually ending up returning to line 7. Okay, it's a little bit tricky. Yeah, you'd think you would return to line 6, but you actually return to the thing that's after it because line 6 is done at this point. Okay, now I'm at line 7 and 3 lines. The line 7 and 3 lines tells me to take a trip back up to new line. Okay, so click forward, and I'm now back up in new line. Now I'm at line 3 and new line, having gotten there from line 7 of 3 lines. It was line 7 of 3 lines that set me up there. And I got into 3 lines by line 11. See, I'm still working on line 11 of 6 lines. Okay, now if I step through this kind of quickly, here's my third call of 3 lines. Okay, now I'm done with 3 lines. I'm about to go back to 6 lines. See, I'm about to return from 3 lines. So I'm about to return from 3 lines because I'm at this line 9. I'm going to go back to line 11 of 6 lines, except that line 11 is done, so I really go back to line 12. Okay, what does line 12 tell me to do? Take a trip back up to 3 lines. Okay, so now I'm back at line 6 of 3 lines, but this time I got there from line 12 of 6 lines. Before, when I was at line 6, it was because I came from line 11. Now I came to line 6 from line 12. Okay, this is what we think of as deep thinking, because we are thinking about being inside of this guy because we're inside of this, because we're inside of this, because we're inside of this. We see all these, we're inside of new line, having come from somewhere inside of 3 line, which was, we got there from somewhere inside of 6 lines, and we got there from somewhere inside of main. And as our programs get more complicated, we have to keep track of all this. It will be important to keep this kind of thinking in mind, that these methods call each other. You step through a method, go back to what called it, then do the next line in what called it, which may call you back into another method. Okay. Now, let's do another thing. Let me write something called for-line. Okay. Now, if I want to write 4 lines, okay, now what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to make this 7 lines. 7 lines will be a call to 3 line and a call to 4 line. Okay, now think about it. What's a clever way to write 4 lines? I could do that. Maybe see a cleverer way to write 4 lines.
3 lines, then plus new line.
Yeah, 3 line and new line. Because, so instead of having 4 lines of code here to print out 4 lines, I've already got something that prints 3 lines. So 3 lines, and a 3 line followed by a new line. Oh, 3 lines followed by a new line will give me 4 lines, and then I don't need these. Notice that how method names can shorten programs, which is one of the key ideas, that method names can make programs a little bit shorter if you reuse them. Okay, so now 7 lines is a call to 3 lines and a call to 4 lines. 3 lines calls new line 3 times. 4 line tries to be a little bit more clever. 4 line calls 3 lines once to get 3 of the lines and then calls new line 1 time. And it doesn't matter what order I do those in. I could call new line then 3 line, or I call 3 line then new line. Okay, and then you could watch this execute. Then then down here I would start off by calling 7 lines. Okay, 7 lines jumps me up to here. Then 7 lines calls 3 line, which jumps me up to here. 3 line calls new line, new line, new line. Then I will return to where I was called by 3 lines, which is down here. Then 4 lines will take me up here to 4 lines, which take me up to 3 lines again, but from inside 4 lines. And then I go up here, here, here. Notice that the flow of execution is not trivial. Flow of execution is not an easy idea. This program now is a fairly, if I step through it real fast, there's the flow of execution. There's like a movie of this yellow line running through my code. If you look on the right-hand side, you see lots of things happening on the right-hand side. You see, as this thing is jumping around in here, you see on the right-hand side, this growing and shrinking of what's called the frames. See, at this point, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames. See, now I only have 3 frames. See, so this is growing and shrinking. The number of frames here is growing and shrinking. Okay. Oops. It's not a trivial matter. It takes real concentration. It's something that takes, nobody steps through this in their mind that fast. Okay. But the key is that you can see how it's like a movie. It's something that's happening in time. Your program is not a static thing. Your program is not a bunch of stuff on the page. Your program is something that happens inside the computer. And that's the big leap in your mind. From seeing a program being a bunch of words on the page to just instinctively thinking of it something that's happening inside the computer. Start at main, do this, which jumps you up to here. This one jumps you up to here. Then this one jumps you to here, then back up to here, then back up to here. Now I can go back over to where I came from here. Then I do this one. This one takes me up to here, which takes me to this one, which takes me back to this one. Yeah, you just follow your nose through the code, thinking about what it's doing, the flow of execution. Okay. All right. So that's already a pretty complicated idea. Okay. Now let's add a little feature to it. Let's add inputs to these things. Okay. All right. So here's how I'll add input to this. I'll go back to this example, and what I'm going to do is, let's see, what's a good way to do this? I want 7 lines of something. So I want 7 lines of the word hello. That's what I really want. I want 7 lines of hello. So that means I want 7 lines to take an input. So I want 7 lines to take an input. So here's how I do that. The input is a string, and I need to give it a name. So I'll call it message. I'll just abbreviate it, MSG. I want 7 lines of this message. So this is called a parameter. I want 7 lines of hello. So 7 lines takes in this parameter, which is the name of the message. Now, in this case, hello is put inside that message. Now, what I need to do is tell 3 lines to print my message 3 times and 4 lines to print my message 4 times. But that means that 4 lines needs to take in its own parameter. It needs to take in a string, which I'll call it I don't want to use the name message again because it gets a little bit confusing. I want to give it a different name here. So 4 lines takes in I'll just call it info. It takes in a little bit of information. So 4 lines takes in a string of information, and then it passes that string to 3 lines, and it passes it to new line. So now it says I want 3 lines of that info, and I want 1 line of that info. Okay, now I have to go here. Now 3 lines needs to take in an input. Okay, and it needs to take in something. I'll just say it takes in a greeting. Okay, 3 lines takes in a greeting, and it's going to print that greeting 3 times. Okay, and then new line, I'll use the same thing. I'll call this one a greeting too. It takes your greeting and it prints it with a period after it. Okay, so I've added parameters to my methods. They take in something and they say 7 lines of that message. Okay, so visualize this. Now watch what's going to happen. I get my first line of output. Now I'm about to call 7 lines, and I'm saying call 7 lines with that message. Now I'm in 7 lines, and that variable holds the string that I sent to it. I sent it this string saying, this is what I want you to print for me 7 times. So see now that over here, I see variables start to appear. So now in my stacked frames, I'll see some variables. Okay, now what does 3 lines do? Well, it takes what its message is and passes it along to 3 lines. Now 3 lines calls its input greeting. So now greeting holds hello. So the line 20 of main calls 7 lines with the message hello. Hello was put into 7 lines message variable, but it just passed its variable to that method 3 lines. So now 3 lines greeting holds hello. 3 lines is going to pass that greeting to new line. Okay, so now I've got new line with the greeting being hello, and it got the greeting from 3 lines, and 3 line got hello from the message of 7 lines, and 7 lines got that from line 15 of main. See, line 15 of main, see, we can't fit it all on one screen anymore. Line 15 of main line 20 of main started it all. It was line 20 of line 15 of 7 lines was the one that called 3 lines, but what started it all was line 20 of main. Okay, so over here in the stack, in the stack diagram, I see the names of the methods and the variables that the method is holding. A little minute ago, we didn't have any variables in them, but now my stack diagram over here has the method, what line I'm at in that method, the variables of that method and what that variable is holding right now. Now, we just passed hello all along. Okay, if I keep on going, I get my hello printed out. Okay, and then I go back to this greeting. I just notice I'm going to keep getting hello printed out over and over again. Now, if I want, I can get I can get 7 lines of goodbye. Okay, by saying I want 7 lines of this message, I can get 7 lines of goodbye. Okay. Okay. So now let me do something, show you a game we can play. These outputs came from 3 line. There was first, second, third. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to put notice I'm changing what's passed to new line. In 3 line, he sends 3 line gets a greeting in, and then he calls new line with his greeting. But actually what I'm doing is I'm putting the number of the call. Like this is the first call, the second call, and the third call. So what he sees in his greeting now will be this number in front of whatever the greeting is. Okay, so when we see the output, we'll see 1, 2, 3 in front of these outputs that come from 3 line. Okay, so what I'm doing here is now each time I call new line, I'm going to give it the parameter is not going to be the same anymore. It's going to be modified. So this is going to be put a 1 in front of greeting, a 2 in front of greeting, and a 3 in front of greeting. So let's just see what this looks like. Okay, I'm up here at new line. Okay, I'm about to call new line. What's being sent to new line is that parameter, but that parameter is the greeting, which is goodbye, with a 1 in front of it. So look what happens. See, new line sees its greeting as 1 point goodbye. So I'm up here now, this greeting is 1 point goodbye because this thing added a 1 point to front here. So then when it gets printed out, you see 1 goodbye. Then you go back. Now I'm at new line. I'm calling it greeting, but greeting's been modified to have a 2 in front of it. See, greeting is now I'm greeting with the 2 goodbye input. So I see 1 goodbye, 2 goodbye. Now I've got the greeting being 3 goodbye. So I get 3 goodbye. Now let's see. New line is about to return to 3 line. 3 line is about to return to 7 line. Okay. Now 7 line is going to call 4 lines. 4 lines going to call 3 lines again, and we'll get the 1, 2, 3 out again. See, 3 lines going to send its greeting. Okay. 3 line has the greeting goodbye, but the first time it gets to 3 lines, we get a 1 point. We get a 1 point in front of it. So now the output will be 1 goodbye, 2 goodbye, 3 goodbye. See, this is the second time through 3 lines. Okay. Now, I'm about to leave 3 lines, and I'm going to go back to 4 lines. When I go back to 4 lines, I'm going to go back to line 11, which will actually take me back to line 12. Now, new info That new line just takes its greeting, which is goodbye, and sends it straight up here, okay, which doesn't print, which prints without a number in front of it. Okay, now we're going to get goodbye without any number in front of it. Okay, so there we got the 7 goodbyes. 6 of them have numbers in front of them, and 1 of them doesn't because of the way 3 lines work. 3 lines tacked on a 1, 2, and 3. So this is just showing you like little games you can play. When 3 line gets his greeting and he's about to pass it to new line, he can make a little change in the greeting and send that change to new line. And then each time he calls new line, he sends a slightly different greeting to new line. Okay, so each time he calls new line, it's a slightly different greeting. So I can modify these parameters that are being sent to this method here. Okay, all right. So now we've seen methods with parameters. Now notice they have the 2 words, parameters and arguments. Okay, there's a slight difference between these 2 words. Sometimes people use them as synonyms, and sometimes they use, let me show you, sometimes they use them to mean 2 different things. Okay, let's go back to our code. Here's 7 lines. Here's a call to 7 lines. Here's the definition. Here's the method definition. Here's the method call. This guy and this guy are kind of, they're related. This string is put into that variable. When I call 7 lines with the string goodbye, it goes into that variable. This is called the argument, and this is called the parameter. Though not everybody agrees on those terminology. Some people call this the parameter and they call this the argument. Some people call them both parameters and both arguments. It's really kind of, unfortunately, there's not a huge amount of agreement on this. But most of the time, people call this the argument. That's the value you put inside of the parameter. So the parameter is the name you give it inside the method. The method has a parameter. So that's a method definition with a parameter. Down here, this is a method call with an argument. The argument gets put inside of the parameter. And that's the best way to use the words. And that I'll pretty much usually consistently refer to this is a parameter, this is an argument. The method call has an argument, the method definition has a parameter. Notice a lot of terminology. A method call versus a method definition. Method call has an argument, method definition has a parameter.
Professor?
Yeah.
Is it possible for a method to have multiple parameters? Like
Yeah.
7 lines could have
Yeah.
a message and something else on it?
Yeah, and that's actually the next section in this book, multiple parameters. See, so let's do an example like that. So let's give 7 lines. Let's see. Let's give 3 lines, 2 parameters. So let's give it a string, a greeting, and int x. Okay, so give it a string and a number. And what I'm going to do now is going to just put the number in front of the greeting. So I'm going to tack on the number to the greeting. Okay, now that will convert, let's see. Now notice that Java doesn't like this very much. You can't tack a number in front of a string. You could put, now watch. Java didn't like that, but it'll like this okay. I can put the number after the greeting, and the number will be converted into a string and put after the greeting. What? Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I forgot to. Let me put it back the way it was. Okay. What I forgot was, see, when I call 3 lines, it now needs 2 parameters. So I go down here to, here's what I call 3 lines. Okay. So give it a number. So I'm saying 3 lines with the info here and that number for the heck of it. Okay. Now it has that greeting and that number, and it tries to put the number in front of the greeting. Okay. Now this is where Java, let's see. Oh, I forgot to put a greeting. No, I forgot to put a number here. So let me put a number here too. I'll give this one the number. Okay, so I have to make sure so that 3 lines needed a number also. See, if I say that 3 lines takes in 2 arguments, then when I call 3 lines, there has to be 2 arguments. Okay, there, all right? So now if I go look at the output, see, there's the 12 in front of goodbye. And then later on, I'm going to get goodbyes with 42s in front of them. Okay? So I have a method now that takes 2 arguments. Oh, notice that this is kind of run together. So you might want to fix that. Like, for example, over here, how can I get a space between this guy and this guy?
Add a quote, space, quote.
Yeah, I have to do the whole, I have to put a quote, space, quote, and another plus there. The number gets converted to a string. Then I tack on a space string. Then I tack on the greeting. And I need to do that in each one of these. So I need a space, then the greeting. Then down here, I need a space, and then the greeting. Okay. On this one, okay, so now I'll get a nice, now it'll look a little bit better. See, now I've got 12 with a space after it. Okay, so I can actually have as many parameters as I want to a method. A method can take lots of, sometimes people write methods that take 10, 12 parameters. It's real common to have methods that take 2 or 3 parameters. Every once in a while, people will write a method that takes a dozen parameters. Okay. Notice we've got a lot going on at this point. We almost run out of time. Yeah, we only got a couple minutes left. But notice that we've got an awful lot going on at this point now. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 methods. We've got the new line that we wrote, the 3 line that we wrote, the 4 line that we wrote, the 7 line that we wrote, and the main method to get us started. We've got these methods taking arguments. We've got methods calling other methods, sometimes, modifying their, playing games with what they, when one method gets in an argument, it does things to the argument and passes it along. Okay. So we've got a lot going on here. Notice that this is also getting hard to read. I tried to make it so that you could get all the code in one window in the visualizer. It doesn't even fit in the window in the visualizer anymore. So you're probably better off going back and putting blank lines between these. These things become much easier to read when you put space between them. In fact, when I'm writing code on my computer, I put 2 blank lines between every method because it just, you want to see the methods as a unit. Each method is a chunk of code. So you want to think about, what does that method do? What does that method do? What does that method do? So it's important to see each method as its own chunk of code. We've got a lot of ideas. We've got method definitions and method calls, method definitions and method calls. Some method definitions will have arguments and some don't. Now they all have arguments. So all of these method definitions, well, yeah, all these method definitions now have an argument to them, a parameter, I should say. So this is, let's see, this is a method definition with two parameters. So when I call 3 lines, I have to make sure I give it 2 arguments. When you declare a parameter, you say the name of the parameter, like it's like naming a variable anywhere else. You decide what the name of it's going to be, and you have to say what type it is. So this one's greeting and this one's string. This one I didn't give it a very good name. I just said X. Okay, it's an integer, and I didn't even say it. I don't really think it has any meaning, so I just gave it X as just an integer. Okay, if there was some real meaning to it, I would be better to give it a name that helped me understand what it meant. But here it doesn't really have any meaning. It's just a number I'm putting in front of the greeting. Okay, so there's a lot of words we define now. Parameters and arguments, flow of execution, stack diagrams, and 2 words that the book actually didn't really use, method definition and method call. That's a very important distinction that I don't think the book made clear enough, that you have 2 things going on. The place where you tell me what the method means, and then the place where you use the method. Okay, here's where you tell me what this word means. Here's where you use it by calling it. Okay, this is one last thing. Got a minute? This is a lot like in mathematics. Let me just show you in your algebra or your calculus class, you do something real similar. In a math class, you say something like f of x is x squared plus 3x plus 2. That's a formula, okay? That's a parabola, okay? Then later on, I can ask, what's f of 4? This is a function definition. From the point of view of programming, this one's a function call. It asks, what's the value of f at 4? So what do you do here? What is it you're supposed to do?
Plug 4 into the function.
Plug 4 into the function. So you think of, oh, 4 goes in there. So that means what then?
You replace all the x's in the equation with
Yeah, you
4.
play. So that means 4 squared, which is 16, plus 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2. See, so you plug in the parameter, the argument, into the parameter. Okay, so function call with argument, function definition with, now in calculus you usually call this a variable, but here we would say with a parameter. But if you look in a calculus book, they'll often call this the argument. You know, they kind of sometimes switch the words around. They'll call this the argument and this the parameter. It really, different people, some people call this the argument and they call this the parameter. Some people call this the argument and they call this the parameter. Unfortunately, not everyone agrees on which is the argument and which is the parameter. So, in the book, we have these 2 important words. I forget even which one he does it. There are parameters and arguments. One is what is in the definition. The other is the one that's in the call. Unfortunately, the 2 words are just, you can't get people to agree. I tend to use this one as parameter and this one as argument, but that's not universal. In fact, I think in calculus, they're more often likely to call this the argument and this the parameter. Okay, but notice that it's very similar to what we're doing in Java. We call these methods, we call these functions. And now in your calculus class, you've probably never done functions of two arguments, two variables, but you will in later on in another calculus, in a more advanced calculus class, you'll start doing two inputs to a function instead of one input to a function. But here we have, we very quickly say, oh, our methods can have two inputs. Okay? In calculus, you actually have to, you don't get to these functions till you get the third semester of calculus. In the third semester of calculus, you learn about functions of two variables. So for 2 semesters of calculus, you do functions of only one variable. But there's a huge overlap between these ideas in algebra and calculus and these ideas in programming. Okay, all right, so that's, we ran out of time. I'll put this example up on the website so you can kind of go back and, you know, we've taken this example in this book and just made it much more complicated. So we started with this bare bones example, and we showed a lot of the ideas in this section by just keep making this example more complicated. But, you know, think about this example. Think about all the names we've given to these things and how we've used them. Okay. Anybody got any last minute question? Any kind of question before we quit? We're going to be doing this for a while. Methods and are really important. So we'll keep talking about methods and writing examples of methods for probably 2 weeks. Yeah, and your next reading assignment is to do methods in this other book, and we'll start talking about that on Thursday, objects and methods. We'll start talking about objects and methods. Okay, anybody have any last minute question? Anything? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll stop sharing. Okay, well, we'll meet again on Thursday. I'll go ahead and end the meeting and see you on Thursday. And if you got questions in the meantime, send me an email or show up in office hours. Okay, goodbye.